Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this 12th episode, counting down the days to Christmas and that fateful night in Boulder, Colorado 24 years ago, we're going to be looking at something that's not often looked at in the Ramsey case, which is the newsletters Patsy Ramsey wrote in 1995 and 1996. The 1996 newsletter is probably more pertinent because it's obviously written around the time of the events, and not only is the newsletter pertinent, but the handwriting is something you'd want to look at as well. Handwriting can evolve a little bit as well, but the important thing to stress in this episode is kind of how the content in both newsletters are similar, and then what you want to do is compare the content to the ransom note. Now, when I say content, I'm not talking about handwriting. I'm talking about the length of the newsletters, the grammar in the newsletters, the punctuation in the newsletters, the style and the pageantry of the newsletters. That's kind of what you want to look at. We will deal with the handwriting in due course, probably closer to Christmas, okay? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed, please do. You can click on the blue icon on the bottom right of your screen, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So we're going to look first of all at the Christmas newsletter from 1995, and it's quite lengthy. And we're going to go through it again, not so much to just indulge in what the newsletter itself is saying, but to think of it in some of the broader context that we've been talking about all along, which is, is there a case to be made potentially for neglect? And as I said, could be benign neglect, it could just be being busy, it could just, and everyone gets busy from time to time. Could that have been the case with the Ramseys? And what better way to examine this than through Patsy's own summation, not only of 1995, but also 1996, okay? Now, I did say in the previous video that I wanted to talk further about Access Graphics, which is actually a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. I've decided not to do that. Just because there didn't seem to be a terrific amount of interest in that. It is interesting how some of the most crucial subjects get the least attention, and that is why some true crime cases stay stuck and unresolved for as long as they do. But one thing just to quickly mention on that subject is, what do you think the situation is like if you are part of Lockheed Martin, right? And you're a defense contractor for the government, and one of your vice presidents gets contacted, whether true or not, but allegedly contacted by a small foreign faction, and then they somehow, get access to the house, and they kind of want to undermine one of their employees. And according to the whole story, it is meant to get at John, right? In other words, it's directed at John. And how comfortable do you think the company feels about that? And there's quite a lot more to say about it, but as I say, there doesn't seem to be that much interest in it. It's not a sexy sounding topic, so I'm not really going to go into it here. So instead, let's just go through the newsletter. And it starts off with a flourish of pageantry, right? It starts off, "'Twas a week before Christmas with a million things to do. And wouldn't you know it, Mom came down with the flu." Right? So you've got a little bit of a flourish there. I won't say it's Shakespearean, but it's got that sort of mischievous quality, opening it with a sort of a rhyme, and kind of in the Christmas spirit. And you can tell Patsy had to have been in quite a good mood. And she talks about, the opening line is "a million things to do." that they are a busy family, right? And she refers to, fortunately, the gifts were all gotten and under the tree, but the Christmas cards didn't make it, as you can well see, also rhyming. And so, according to this, the Ramseys were so busy that they didn't get, I don't know whether they sent Christmas cards and they didn't get there on time, or whether they just didn't get time to send the Christmas cards. I'm not quite sure. Probably the latter. Then she says, so we'll take this opportunity to extend the Christmas cheer and be the first to wish you a healthy and happy new year. So that entire first paragraph is kind of a clever little flourish, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's Patsy's gone to some effort to kind of say what she wanted to say in kind of a, you know, a little bit of a, in terms of a letter, a little bit of a performance. And it is really important to remember and to think of Patsy as kind of a pageant queen. That was her whole life. That was what made her tick, right? And something else now that is very, I guess, pertinent is just in that opening paragraph, notice how many exclamation marks there are. If you go to the Ransom note, and I'm not going to do that with you guys, certainly not at this point, but you guys can go to the Ransom note on your own and count the exclamation marks in the Ransom note. And as we go through this letter, I want you to just take note of the exclamation marks. Some people use them a lot. Patsy does. Some use them sparingly. I'm one of those people. I don't use that kind of emphasis very much. I prefer to use italics or underlining a word or something like that. But you can see from the sheer amount of exclamation marks that Patsy's an effusive person, that she's an emotional person, that she's trying to emphasize things. And pageants emphasize things as well. Pageants emphasize beauty and talent and whatnot. Anyway, the next line says, we finally given in to the computerized form letter. She says, what better way to keep the high-tech industry in business? Speaking of business, John and Access are doing great guns, are going great guns. So this actually explains why I've been struggling to find the handwriting of these newsletters. It's because they weren't handwritten to begin with. I don't know about the newsletters prior to this. I don't know if any of you have been able to locate the handwriting of the, say, 1994 newsletter. I will see if I can find it. But that is something just to talk about quickly, is that they struggled to find samples of Patsy's handwriting in the house. And my impression from Linda Hoffman-Pugh was that Patsy left kind of notes all the time. It was sort of Patsy's habit to leave all sorts of notes and instructions and post-its constantly, right? And so you kind of get the sense from Patsy that is kind of how she communicates. That she likes writing, and she did study journalism as far as I'm aware, but she was trained to write, and she's a good writer, and you can see that. And then when they looked for samples of handwriting, they couldn't find any, unless you count the Ransom note as a sample. And then I think they had to go to the house in Charlevoix to also find samples there, right? And what is it quite interesting is either the myth or the idea or the speculation that did Patsy's handwriting change after the Ransom note. But I think that is something we can deal with in another episode. So obviously this newsletter typed out and kind of emailed, she calls it a computerized form letter, is giving an idea what is happening in America in 1995, that they are transitioning as a country into, computers, email and that kind of thing. And John is at the kind of cutting edge of that. John is at the, or leading edge of that. John is part of a company that is kind of assembling all the computer pieces and parts that is going to build part of America's computational network, which is why he did so well so quickly. anyway, she says, what better way? Anyway, she says, John and Axis are going great guns. And so that was in 1995. She says, Europe has been successfully conquered with offices in every country except Norway. Mexico and Canada opened too. Can you believe this grew out of our garage on Northridge? Anyway, John was rewarded by parent company Lockheed Martin by being elected an office of the company. I don't know exactly what that means, but I presume it means he was made a vice president. Now, you might think, wow, that's quite amazing, but there are probably dozens, if not over 20 or 30 vice presidents at Lockheed Martin. John was one of them. But that is still kind of a big deal. And the thing that I think you've got to bear in mind is John ultimately answered to Lockheed Martin because, that's now the parent company. And again, you would ask yourself, how would Lockheed Martin feel about what is going on with the president of their company? And I don't necessarily mean that they suspected the Ramseys. I'm just saying they felt awkward. They were in an awkward position. And, to cut a long story short, John lost his job very shortly after Jonbenet died, probably about 11 months. And anyway, as I say, that is a separate thing to talk about. Then she goes on saying, all work and no play make John a dull boy, so he leaves plenty of time for the ladder. Now, it's quite interesting. In the Ransom note, the writer also refers to John's, John, something about Southern common sense. Sort of an informal way of referring to him, almost a cheeky way of referring to him. And so this, can you see how this corresponds to that? She says, all work and no play make John a dull boy, so he leaves plenty of time for the ladder. This year, John Andrew, and Melinda took the crew of the Miss America, our sailing sloop, to victories in the NOOD races in Chicago and a fourth place division finish of the Chicago Mackinac Island race. So what I just want to emphasize there is, if you're talking about this idea of could a child feel neglected given the situations and circumstances that were going on, well, I can tell you I was part of a mixed family in my backstory, in my background, and I was quite happy about the how can I put it, about the other three children that sort of joined our family. But I can tell you now, my siblings weren't. So I've got two siblings, and then I had sort of three, let's call them step siblings. And I got along well with them, and they got along well with me, and we got along. But my brother and my sister didn't get along with them. And with a result that because they, I don't know, were resentful or something, they kind of got sidelined a bit, whether because they sidelined themselves or because, I don't know. And the other thing you've got to bear in mind is if there are 6 children, the attention that one parent is giving inside the household is going to be less. And that was the case with us. So in the Ramsey case, it was 4 children, so not quite as many, but nevertheless, you've got a situation of splitting your attention between, the older children and the younger children, or the children of this household and that household. And I think it's even more difficult when the children aren't necessarily living under the same roof, right? But what this is just showing is that that John would spend time with his older children sailing, and then he was obviously not with his younger children, just as a kind of a matter of course. Patsy goes on to say, 70 knot winds in the Mac race really made the finish line look pretty good. John Andrew is a freshman at Colorado University in Boulder, and Melinda is due to complete her nursing degree from Medical College of Georgia in Augusta next June. Now, this is quite a interesting section of the newsletter that I want to compare between the newsletters. And what I want to compare is the length. It's quite simple. It's the length of this paragraph compared to all the others, but specifically compared to the one on Jonbenet, right? And just looking at the number of lines, there's 1, 2, 3, 4.5 lines in this paragraph about Burke. And it refers to Boy Scouting, by the way, right over there. Then we go to the next paragraph. I'll read them in a moment. And this is about Jonbenet, and it's a much longer paragraph. It's more detailed. And if you just look at the number, I don't know if this is nitpicking, but if you look at the number of exclamation marks in the Burke paragraph, there's one there and there's one there. So there are 2, right? And that's giving you an idea of Patsy's feelings about Burke, just in a general way, in 1995. With Jonbenet, there is 3. 1, 2, 3. Now you might say, well, that's not a big deal. The one paragraph gets 2 exclamation marks, the other 3. But the thing that we're trying to get at here is, how is Burke feeling about Jonbenet's success? How is Burke feeling about Patsy's focus on Jonbenet, not him? How would he have felt about that? You could argue that, well, Burke actually features in this paragraph about Jonbenet, so maybe you should add on a line. But I don't think so. I mean, each paragraph is sort of this one is dedicated to John, this one is to Burke, this one is to Jonbenet, this one is to herself, and it's quite limited where Patsy sort of talks about herself, although she does talk about herself in others. What is also interesting is she refers to herself hauling Jonbenet around. So who was hauling Burke around, kind of thing. So let's go through these paragraphs. I'm going to refer you to the 1996 newsletter in a moment, dealing with the same thing. The length of the paragraph about Burke and the length of the paragraph about Jonbenet. Bear in mind, if Patsy's got a lot to say about either of her children, it means that a lot has happened. She's been involved a lot with a particular child. If she doesn't have that much to say, doesn't it mean that she's had kind of less involvement? Not necessarily, I'm sure, but possibly. Do you agree? So she says, busy is Burke in his 3rd year at a new school named High Peaks. And Jonbenet was at that school the following year. She talks about it is a core knowledge school which accesses high academics and personal achievement. He loves it. Now, these first 2 sentences don't really say anything about Burke. They basically just say where he is. It's kind of more about the school than about Burke. Then what is about Burke is that he loves school and is continuing with Boy Scouting and the piano. I can't really imagine Burke at the piano, but so there is a reference to him being a scout in 1995. And then this is quite a personal comment. This winter is the tallest guy in his basketball team. Summer on Charlevoix was spent taking golf and sailing lessons each day. Burke is quite the sailor. So there's a reference to playing golf. There's a reference to kind of the activities, hobbies Burke was doing when he was in Michigan. Now, what does Boy Scouting, taking golf, and sailing lessons involve in a general sense? So Boy Scouting would involve things like whittling, I guess, to some extent. I'm not going to go into all of those things, but it's a certain amount of working with your hands and working with tools and this and that and the next thing. Also camping and that kind of thing, right? Then golf is about striking a ball with a stick, right? And then sailing lessons is about handling nylon cords. Would you agree with that? Just in a general sense. Then now we go to Jonbenet. Jonbenet too had a busy summer in Charlevoix. Now notice how these sentences are totally different. So Burke is busy, and he's basically just at school. So when Patsy's thinking about what to say about Burke, she's just sort of like, well, he's at school, and he likes school, and he's tall, right? And then these are his hobbies. With Jonbenet, it starts off with what she's achieved, right? Jonbenet too had a busy summer in Charlevoix. She was crowned Little Miss Charlevoix in a pageant in June and spent the rest of the summer riding in convertibles in various hometown parades throughout Michigan. Now, this already just sounds like a lot more fun. Although the sailing lesson sounds quite fun as well. I don't know whether playing the piano is fun, but the whole thing about riding in convertibles in parades, doesn't that sound like the kind of thing Patsy would get enthusiastic about? Then he says she performed a patriotic tap and song for her talent. She and Burke both won ribbons in several decorated bicycle contests. Wow, there is something about a bicycle. Something has come up in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this, just about a bicycle. Is a bicycle something that the kids were interested? It seems like it. And it's something that Jonbenet and Burke were involved in this case. Now bear in mind, the very next year, Jonbenet got a bicycle for Christmas, and so did Patsy, and Burke didn't get one. And a bicycle's a pretty big deal for a kid, isn't it? I mean, it's a big gift. It's something you can ride. It's something you can really enjoy. And interestingly, in the Dr. Phil show in 2016, Burke claimed he also got a bicycle. He said, we both got bikes. But it doesn't look like that was the case from the statements of the Ramseys, to the police. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying the bicycle thing is definitely something perhaps to pay attention to. In October, Jonbenet became Little Miss Colorado. This is another achievement. She rode on the Good Ship Lollipop float during the Boulder Christmas Parade. And so what she did in 1995, she kind of repeated again in 1996. But other things were also going on. So the year she had in 1995, she repeated in 1996. But what had changed? Well, she was at school, proper school, which we'll get to in a second. And her father's work was even busier than it was. So Jonbenet's pageants were more and busier, and so was her father's business activity. And here's something else. Grandpa Paul built the float. So this is not just Jonbenet who's sort of getting the attention of her mother in terms of the pageantry and the pageants. It's also Patsy's father that is sort of, mucking in and getting involved. And we know that Patsy's other family members were also into the pageants. So we see there that he built the float. Another thing just to point out here is that she and Burke both won ribbons in several decorated bicycle contests. I don't know if that has to do with a pageant, but if you think about Burke decorating a bicycle, a boy decorating a bicycle, it's not really a Boy Scout thing to do, is it? And so how did Burke feel about all the pageants and the makeup and the photo shoots? I mean, he's never going to become Miss America, right? So what is he supposed to do to impress his mother, to get her attention, right? Whereas Jonbenet just does what she's kind of enjoying, and her mother's delighting in that. You can see that. Grandpa Paul built the float, ! She waved and sang all along the parade mark, ! She also takes piano, violin, and drama classes. Busy little kindergartner, ! Busy mom hauling her around. And so you're getting a sense of genuine excitement from Patsy, but also that Jonbenet is also quite busy with all of her classes. Then Patsy talks about herself briefly. I continue to have good checkups at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland. God has surely blessed me with energy and the ability to return to raising a family. I thank Him every morning when I wake up and see the sunrise reflecting on the flat irons over Boulder. Please continue to keep us in your prayers. Then the next paragraph, hope your Christmas was merry and here's to 1996. By the time you read this, we'll be cheering on the Buffs at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas and then onto the Fiesta Bowl in Phoenix. Thanks to everyone, and there's more exclamation marks here. In this final paragraph, so what's quite interesting in the penultimate paragraph about herself, there's not a single exclamation mark. So I think Patsy's quite anxious, depressed, concerned, worried about her own health and her own condition. And, we can say that with some compassion, because Patsy had cancer and she got cancer again, and cancer did eventually claim her. So that it would be understandable to feel that way. But coming back to the final paragraph, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 exclamation marks in about 5 sentences. And that just shows you someone who loves to use exclamation marks. Once again, I want to invite you to go to the Ransom note and just notice the exclamation marks in the Ransom note. I believe there's one in the very first line. Listen carefully. And that is the end of the letter, the Ramseys. And now we go to 1996. Dear friends and family, it's been another busy year at the Ramsey household. I can't believe it's over and time to start again! Exclamation mark. So if we look at the 1996 newsletter, it again starts off about it's a busy year, and so you're already getting the sense that there might not be time to pay attention to somebody if they really need it, because there's a lot going on. And anyway, she says, I can't believe it's almost over and time to start again. And so in the second paragraph, it refers to Melinda, 24, graduated from Medical College of Georgia and is working in pediatric ICU at Kennestone Hospital in Atlanta. John Andrew, 20, is a sophomore at the University of Colorado. Burke is a busy 4th grader where he really shines in math and spelling. He played flag football this year and is currently on a basketball binge! Exclamation mark. His little league was number 1. He's lost just about all of his baby teeth, so I'm sure we'll be seeing the orthodontist in 1997! Exclamation mark. Now, what I want to draw your attention to here is juxtaposing the paragraph about her stepchildren, and that's another part just to bear in mind, is that Patsy's also got to deal with these other children. So for John's the kind of only constant in terms of the children. So there's John, then there are his children, Melinda and John Andrew, and then there's Burke and Jonbenet, right? So John is the only constant there. Patsy's not a constant necessarily with Melinda and John Andrew because she's not their mother. And obviously it's a little bit of a difficult thing. How much should you be their mother? How much should you be involved? But what I want to show you is there's barely 2 sentences dealing with her stepchildren. Just basically a newsy thing saying Melinda graduated and John Andrew is at a school, right? He's at university. And if you look at the sentence on Burke, it's kind of similar. He's also just kind of at school, and it's a little bit more effusive, but whereas the previous paragraph is barely 3 lines, the one on Burke is also just 3 lines, right? And then look at Jonbenet. It's way longer than 3 lines. It's sort of almost double the length of the previous 2 paragraphs, right? Why? Because Jonbenet is where Patsy's heart is. And you can see it, you can sense it, you can feel it in the letters and how much time Patsy spends thinking about Jonbenet expressing what has happened with her. Right? So just before we get to Jonbenet, I just want to highlight something in this paragraph, is that Little League is baseball, and it could be softball as well. Patsy herself actually played softball also, and we know that bats were part of the crime scene, softball bats and I think baseball bats as well. Not all of them could be accounted for. Some of them, I think, outside they said, well, it might be somebody else's or something like that. But I just think that that's quite important to mention. I'll come back to why this is important in another episode. So now we get to Jonbenet. Jonbenet is enjoying her first year in real school. So obviously when you go to real school, in Patsy's words, there's a certain amount of extra effort that's required, adaptation, work, all that kind of thing. And so I think this could have put a certain amount of stress on Jonbenet, in terms of this little girl who's already busy with all these other things and what she was doing at school. Then she says, kindergarten in the core knowledge program is fast-paced and 5 full days a week. Again, that is giving you a sense that this might make Jonbenet feel tired occasionally, especially with the pageantry going on, the pageants and the pageantry going on as well at the same time. Then Patsy says she has already been moved ahead to first grade math. She continues to enjoy participating in talent and modeling pageants. She was named America's Royale Tiny Miss last summer and is Colorado's Little Miss Christmas. Her teacher says she's outgoing and that she will never have trouble delivering an oral book report. And this is kind of a subtle point here, is that Jonbenet is obviously, through Patsy's help, but also it's possibly part of her personality, she's a extrovert. She's someone who's expressive. She's someone who is kind of friendly and so on. And a lot of people like extroverts because they are so entertaining and interesting and exciting. And one's got to kind of ask yourself, if Jonbenet was so outgoing, what was Burke like? Also, something just to compare is Jonbenet had been moved ahead to first grade math. I don't know what it means that Burke really shines in math. I don't know if it means he does quite well or really well, but to say that Jonbenet has been moved ahead to first grade math seems, I don't know, if you compare the two, how do you think they compare? And siblings do tend to compare one another. I know, as a little boy, I was very fond of drawing pictures, and so was my brother, and we often, drew the same picture and showed them to our family, and then, who drew the best picture. If we were swimming, it was who was the fastest swimmer. So there are often comparisons that other people draw between siblings, and that siblings between themselves draw with one another. And it's not always good for one sibling when another kind of transcends them. And in my experience, I eventually, because I'm the middle child, I became, I guess, a better swimmer than my brother, and it didn't go down very well. I was asked to sort of not talk about it, anyway, I won't go into that, but I'm just saying you can have a sense of a sibling feeling transcended can be resentful or hurt, or might kind of become more introverted than he already is, or might feel just that his ego is impinged on, or that his status is impinged on. Does that make sense? Okay, I want to wrap this up. I see we had about 35 minutes. John is always on the go, traveling hither and yon. So this is confirming what the gardener was saying, that Jonbenet was kind of, missing her father because he was very busy. So that is kind of confirming that. Access recently celebrated its 1 billion mark in sales, so he's pretty happy, exclamation mark. He and his crew were underway in the Port Hudron to Mackinac Island race in July, but had to pull out midway due to a lack of wind. Can you believe that? But his real love is the new old-looking boat, Grand Season, which he spent months designing. So this is giving you a bit of an idea of the sort of glamorous lifestyle behind the scenes. You know, his business is doing very well, but he's also out sailing. And you also kind of get a sense that the Ramseys have a kind of a formula. They do this every year, they do that every year, and they don't sort of deviate from that. They have all of these engagements, right? They're kind of like an A-list couple in a way. Then in the next paragraph, she talks about herself. She says, I spend most of my free time working in the school and doing volunteer work. The Charlevoix house was on the home tour in July and will likely appear in one of the Better Homes and Gardens publications in 1997. On a recent trip to New York City, my friend and I appeared amid the throng of fans on the Today Show. I think my friend and I is a reference to Susan Stein. And then she says, Al Roker and Bryant actually talked to us and we were on camera for a few fleeting moments. So you can get from that a sense that Patsy's still very kind of interested in being the center of attention. Patsy enjoys being on camera. Patsy enjoys her own performances and contributions to kind of pageantry, if that makes sense. And she's also interested in kind of dressing up her home. Charlevoix house was on the home tour and it'll be in a magazine publication, right? Now, if you think about that, the Charlevoix house in a magazine, and look at the state that the house in Boulder was at the time of the crime, it was kind of, despite it being Christmas, it was kind of cluttered and messy, right? Throughout the parents' bedroom, the children's bedrooms, the basement, the kitchen, pretty much everywhere. Now we go to the last paragraph. We are all enjoying continued good health and look forward to seeing you in 1997. Now, if you take that statement, is that really true? I mean, in a previous episode, we looked at Jonbenet's health and it wasn't that great. She was constantly going to the doctor, 33 times, I think, in 2 years or something. Is that accurate, or is it 4 years? Anyway, she went to the doctor quite a few times in 1996, suffering from sleep problems, from bedwetting, and all that kind of thing. So that's a little bit of a, let's just say, interesting statement on that topic. And then she says, looking forward to seeing you in 1997, exclamation mark. By the way, there's an exclamation mark in the final, at the end of the sentence in the previous paragraph. And then she says, one final note. Thank you to all my friends and my dear husband for surprising me with the biggest, most outrageous 40th birthday bash I've ever had, exclamation mark. And so yes, she's referring to, that's what she likes, is biggest, most outrageous. And this is again just confirming the kind of person Patsy is. She's an extravagant person who likes to celebrate and express herself, and she likes things to be over the top, if I can put it that way. And then she says, we'll be spending my actual birthday on the Disney Big Red Boat over the new year. So it's very much spare no expense, this, that, endless celebrations. Patsy has 2 celebrations for 40th birthday, one on a big red boat and another one, the biggest, most outrageous party. And so you get that sense that that's kind of going on, is that they're very busy, but they're also very busy celebrating all sorts of different things. And what happens if a child starts to either feel ill or tired, or in another way kind of starting to withdraw? What happens in that situation? I can tell you, in my family, and I could be projecting here, but in my family, when we had this sort of mixed family situation, the kids that aren't on board just don't sort of come along. A lot is happening, and if they don't feel like coming along, they must, entertain themselves. And could that have happened here? So I'm not going to take it further than that. For those interested in the Chris Watts case, the next episode is going to be certainly quite interesting, I think. Certainly if you found the previous episode interesting, you'll find this one interesting. It is called The Crucial Question We All Forgot to Ask. So look out for that on YouTube probably in the next hour or two. Thank you for listening. To all those who have subscribed in the last couple of days, welcome. If you haven't subscribed, please do like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.